And hello again, I'm Miranda Kahn, and I'm here with my co-host, John Cardillo and Dr. Gina Loudon.
And welcome to this Thursday edition, our second hour of this Thursday edition of America Talks Live.
And we want to take your phone calls today, so we want you to call in right now, 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629.
Now for our top story, which is, of course, the Justice Department's Inspector General report being released today. And that's on the FBI's conduct during the Hillary Clinton email probe. It's going to be coming out in just a couple of hours, a bit later this afternoon.
Yeah, I think they're talking about 2 o'clock this
Around 2
afternoon.
p.m.,
We're
yeah.
going to keep a close watch on that. The 18-month-long report will review allegations of FBI misconduct during the 2016 presidential election and the way that the Bureau handled the probe into Hillary Clinton's email server. It may also deal with leaks that came from the FBI and the Justice Department during the campaign. But we're starting to get some hints.
Yes, we are.
It's going to be in that. It's expected to be a 500-page report.
I assume they had
Pretty lengthy.
1.4 million pages of documents,
Right.
so 500 pages seems conservative.
Seems, yeah, conservative.
Sure,
So, but Bloomberg is reporting that according to that report, so apparently it either got excerpts of that report or
Yeah.
it was leaked the entire report. But according to Bloomberg's report, former FBI Director James Comey deviated from procedures in his handling of the Clinton email probe. Again, they're basing this on that report. Bloomberg also claims that the report says that Comey damaged the FBI's image of impartiality, even though he wasn't motivated by political bias.
I think it'll be a lengthy report and a careful report. It will be released soon, and I think it will help us better fix any problems that we have and reassure the American people that some of the concerns that have been raised are not true.
And that was Attorney General Jeff Sessions commenting about that report, what could come out of it. There's talk about people
Right.
possibly getting fired.
I'll
We'll see.
tell you my concerns, Miranda. Gina, I don't like the language. I think it was whitewashed, deviated from procedures. So what? He was the director of the FBI. He chose to deviate from procedures. Very, very weak language. He tarnished the FBI's reputation of impartiality, but wasn't politically
Right.
motivated. This to me seems like it's going to be a big dud, a big nothing. I think conservatives are going to be very frustrated. I feel I will be. I think Gina will be.
Well, let's find out if our guests are going to be. We want to welcome in Wendy Patrick. Wendy is a veteran trial attorney and GOP strategist. Can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. We also want to bring in former federal prosecutor Larry Klayman. He is also the founder of Freedom Watch. Thank you both for joining us. Pleasure to have both of you guys on the program.
So, Larry, let me start with you. And Wendy, great to see you. Larry, I'm very concerned with the wording of this report. As I was just telling Miranda and Gina, seems very tepid. It seems like the claims of whitewash are valid. Yeah. He deviated from procedures. Big deal. He hurt the appearance of impartiality, but it wasn't politically motivated. So, Larry, big dud, or are we just seeing an excerpt that's not representative of the whole report?
It's worse than a dud. It is a cover-up. That's what it is. I predicted it. I predicted it would be whitewashed. My words exactly. I'm sending a press release out shortly based on that Bloomberg report. And it's clear what Sessions said. It's going to exonerate the Justice Department in many respects. You know, Sessions is under investigation himself, as we've said many times, by Mueller. He's frightened of his shadow. He's part of this deep state. He's a politician. And the Justice Department is obviously going to protect itself. So all he was doing with this IG report was letting off some steam, some pressure for him not doing anything. And that's been apparent all along. I hate to say it, but I've been right. You know, I've had a lot of experience. I had 40 years dealing with these people in Washington. I was a member of the Justice Department. I was a trial attorney prosecutor. This is what they do. They cover it up. So no surprises here. We have to push on at Freedom Watch and you at Newsmax to get the truth. And we're bringing lawsuits to remove Mueller, to hold Sessions accountable, to get the IG to do his job. I filed lawsuits to force the IG to investigate the Mueller matter and other matters, including Klayman Bundy and the Bundy family, who were also subjected to malicious prosecution. So we are in a state of crisis here. We have no Justice Department. You only have groups like Judicial Watch that are willing to do anything here.
Right. Wendy, do you agree with Larry, or do you see this differently?
Well, I agree with part of what Larry had to say. And in fact, you know, you've got to figure if there's 500 pages, there's got to be something for everyone, right? That's a lot of reading. I think the five of us have our work cut out for us tonight.
Yeah.
But one of the things Larry brought up is a point that's been made that I think is quite interesting. If you have the IG available to do this type of a watchdog investigation, why do you also need a special counsel? It probably depends on the kinds of things you're investigating. And obviously, people are waiting to see whether there's anything that comes out of the IG report that is helpful to the special counsel. But we seem to be mixing in terms of the who's doing what and who's looking at what. It seems to be a little bit confusing as to, well, are we going to be able to use anything in those 500 pages to either bring clarity or disprove anything that we already know about that's during the course of the Mueller probe? In other words, try to kind of simplify it to a couple examples. If, in fact, the president's firing, legitimate firing of James Comey had something to do with the way he was doing his job, wouldn't the IG's report finding exactly that corroborate the president and go against any finding of obstruction of justice that Mueller might be investigating?
Sure.
So it's interesting that it's coming out today, right when we're also talking about whether the president's going to sit down with Mueller's team. Everybody's going to have to step back and have 500 pages to read before we go any further with that question.
Let me respond to that quickly.
Please.
Okay, number one, there's no such thing.
No, go ahead, Larry.
Go
Please
ahead.
respond.
Yeah, there's no such thing as truth or falsity in Washington anymore. It's all about my side, your side, spin, everything else. This Inspector General's report was designed to checkmate the President of the United States, to not appoint a special counsel, to not order either Sessions or Rosenstein to do it. Because now if he does it, it looks like he's politically piling on and won't accept a so-called neutral person like Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General. There's nobody neutral in Washington. He's an Obama appointee. This was clear from the start. Very few people understand the way Washington works the way I do. By the way, I just misspoke. I run Freedom Watch now. Freedom Watch does what Judicial Watch used to do, bringing hard-hitting cases. We're basically the only Justice Department out there because, and we have limited means. That's why I want to be appointed special counsel, so I have the powers of the Justice Department behind me. Now, are the powers to be likely to do that? Probably not, because they don't want anybody that'll get the job done. And last point, President is not getting good advice. I like Rudy Giuliani, but you can't go along to get along. He needs to take charge right now. He needs to fire Rosenstein. Rosenstein has threatened congressional investigator. He should fire him. Sessions should be asked to resign, take the resignation, clean house at the Justice Department, because this IG report is another example of the corruption at the Justice Department and why the entire place needs to be cleaned out right now.
We're getting news right now that there will be a press conference tonight at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Chris Wray will be delivering this press conference regarding this IG report. Larry, what can we expect, and how much credence do you give it?
Christopher Wray is extremely weak director of the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He's a young guy. He wants, again, to get along, to go along to get along, however you want to say it, is that he is part of this establishment institution. He doesn't want to have a knife put in his back by the rest of the FBI. He is part of the cover-up, and he needs to be replaced too. You need people in there that are independent, that aren't part of this Justice Department establishment. You know, I left it after 2 years because I saw politics back in 1982. Now it's 100 times worse today. And that's why I started Judicial Watch and later Freedom Watch, because there is no Justice Department that will get to any of these political type cases. They cover everything up. And the only time any president or any public official was ever held accountable was Richard Nixon, which the press hated, and he resigned. So you might have Andrew McCabe made the sacrificial lamb, but everybody else is going to walk off scot-free, including Hillary Clinton, if nothing is done.
Okay. And Wendy, we want to get to you on that same question, too. But I want to compound that with another thing that's really bothering me, because I just don't understand how it is they can comment on motivation. How do they know what someone's motivation is? That seems like a very glaring comment to me. And also, as I said, want your comment on this Christopher Wray press conference coming up at 5:30.
Gina, that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I've been talking about that all day long. You look at actions, and then you also, according to what kind of a crime or allegation is being brought, as Larry knows, you also have to have certain types of motivation or intent. So in order to determine intent, obviously, you look at circumstantial evidence of intent. Why did somebody do something? Look at the who said what when, you look at the circumstances, but it's so difficult. And when you think about something like obstruction of justice, it's almost impossible to prove unless you have a significant amount of information, of circumstantial evidence. In the real world, and I've been a prosecutor for many, many years, you almost need them to have told somebody something that will lead you to believe that's why they made the actions they did. So tying that all into both the IG report and the press conference, I wonder, by the way, if it's a coincidence it's coming out on the president's birthday.
And on the heels of Singapore, and there are so many other things, yes.
So will this be the president he's wishing for?
Would it be the birthday present? I don't think it
That's
will.
not what you
I know
guys-
Larry doesn't think it's the birthday present. The
No,
president
I don't think so
is wishing
either.
for.
I think we're all
I
in
don't think Wendy
agreement.
does. Yeah.
Well, we still want to talk about Michael Cohen, the president's personal attorney, what Rudy Giuliani had to say about that, what Alan Dershowitz is saying, whether or not there's this report out saying that he will cooperate with investigators, but...
Yeah, Giuliani saying it's not true, but if he does, who cares? Because we have nothing to hide anyway. And
Right.
Dershowitz is saying, well, if he does, there's very limited things he can share because of privilege. So it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and I want you guys to weigh in on that when we come back. And a reminder to our audience, you can always weigh in on the conversation. 1-877-NEWSMAX is the number to call. We're going to talk more about Mueller's Russia probe.
Right.
And again, we're going to talk about Michael Cohen coming up. We'll be right back.
Both on its face and as applied. Because on its face...
The statute, just the
Yeah,
statute.
the statute itself.
Yeah.
And second, the fact that it was produced by what might have been a totally illegal counterintelligence investigation that they tried to make into a criminal investigation. And clearly by the Comey memo, we have to see what Horowitz says tomorrow. Like Professor Calabrese said, that memo could blow the whole thing up.
Welcome back to America Talks Live. You just heard from President Trump's lawyer, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, say that special counsel Robert Mueller's appointment was illegal. It mirrors many constitutional attorneys who call it unconstitutional. Meanwhile, members of GOP leadership are reportedly calling on Mueller to wrap things up. Politico is reporting that people who said the special counsel shouldn't have a deadline are now saying he should and calling on him to end the probe. That message has caught on as Trump's party searches for a way to talk about Mueller's mandate to investigate Russian connections within the president's inner circle without alienating President Trump.
And that's where we want to bring back Larry Klayman and Wendy Patrick. Thank you both for sticking around. So let's start with you, Wendy. Illegal?
Which part of it? We've attacked so many different aspects.
So was the appointment of Mueller illegal, going to what Giuliani's point that he was making there?
Well, again, when you talk about whether or not something's illegal, you're talking about interpretation of authority. And as we've seen over the course of the last almost year and a half, there's different interpretations of authority, of whether or not this kind of appointment should have been made, whether it could have been made. And it's the same kind of interpretation of authority that we now find ourselves discussing as to whether we should end it. Should we have started it? And now that it's going, can we end it? I would add, too, the reason that this is the timing is such, the IG report's coming out today, and the supposedly the Mueller investigation is getting ready to wrap up, is all of that ties into whether or not it's legal to require the president to testify. And if the answer to that is yes, do you subpoena him? What if he won't come voluntarily? Do we wait and let this go all the way up to the Supreme Court, who's getting ready to go into the summer recess? So I guess the short answer is it depends on who you ask. It's been certainly an interesting question, one in which we really should have an answer, but we really don't with any strong citation, not at this point.
But I'm asking you personally, what do you think?
About whether or not the special counsel should have been appointed? Mm-hmm. Well, we do have the authority to appoint special counsels. We do all the time. But what the question you got to ask here is, did this set of circumstances warrant it?
Right, and that's what I'm asking you.
I think yes, in terms of what they were originally looking at. I think the problem that we ran into is it's grown so far past what it was originally intended to do. You can look at whether or not there was Russian interference between the campaign and the run-up to the election. But what I think the problem is it's gone way past the mandate where we've got all these tangential investigations going on, including the request to interview the president. So you've got to ask yourself, how is that tied to the original mandate of the probe? So that, I think, what the problem is, not so much with whether or not one should have been convened, but gosh, have we let it get out of control in terms of its scope?
Wendy, I have another question for you. I'm going to pose the same question to Larry after you answer. Okay, so let's set aside whether or not it was legal or constitutional for him to be appointed. Let's set aside the question of scope. Do you think that Robert Mueller is now acting professionally and ethically? We have three situations now. We have the General Flynn case, excuse me, where exculpatory evidence is being questioned, his handling of it, Mueller's handling of it, by Judge Sullivan. We have the Manafort case by Judge Jackson. Mueller just lost a motion on an exculpatory evidence issue. And now we have this Concord management case where Mueller is actually asking to be able to withhold exculpatory evidence. Look, I come out of law enforcement. You guys are attorneys, but I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen a prosecutor this heavy-handed, kicking in Manafort's door at 5 o'clock in the morning, taking his wife out of bed at gunpoint, and now blatantly wanting to withhold discovery from the defense. Hasn't Mueller gone beyond all the rules of ethics and legal professionalism, prosecutorial good conduct at this point, Wendy?
John, here's the prosecutor's perspective on all of your questions. Prosecutors, as Larry also knows, have to operate behind, and I don't want to say everything is totally secret, but they have to operate behind a wall. And that in other words, we're not privy to all of the facts and circumstances that justify why Mueller does what he does. We look at the optics and we can criticize the optics, but I would never hazard to make a judgment as to whether or not he is acting ethically or legally without knowing the facts and circumstances that are causing him to do what he did. Obviously, everybody knows you can't do a pre-dawn raid like they did with Manafort unless you have facts and probable cause to back it up. So too with many of the other actions he's taken. But when we do see actions that to us look like they go beyond the scope, I wouldn't make that judgment without having all the facts in front of me. Similarly, that a judge wouldn't make a ruling without hearing from both sides. And by necessity, we're not allowed to know what facts Mueller has that is causing him to act the way he can. That's the best answer I can give you right now, giving the prosecutor's perspective.
Larry, we have about
Larry's
40...
former prosecutor, he can go farther.
Gotcha. Thanks, Wendy. Larry, we have about 45 seconds. Your answer on that.
Number one, we know how Mueller's acting, and that's the problem with Sessions and Rosenstein. He's got a rubber stamp. He's got a rubber stamp in the federal judiciary. It's just rubber stamps. Amy Berman Jackson in the D.C. case. And now Judge Ellis, who was criticized for making a rather intelligent comment that you've gone beyond the scope of your authority. We can agree that he's gone beyond the scope of his authority. What he's also been doing is leaking grand jury information on a near daily basis. And I have filed a lawsuit, which I got actually a Clinton-appointed judge, one of the honest ones, Emmett Sullivan, to say you're going to have to cough all that up on September 4th. If we can show, and I believe that these documents will show, communications with the media, releasing grand jury information, Mueller himself will have been proven to have committed a crime and he'll be gone. Even Sessions will have to fire him at that point. But I think that Wendy's being too charitable here. You know, one thing about me, and I'm not criticizing Wendy, she's a very bright lady and she has the same experience.
Larry, we're going to have to, unfortunately, leave it there. We do need to go to a commercial break, but we do appreciate your time and Wendy's time
Thanks,
as well.
Wendy.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Larry.
Guys.
Still to come, we're going to be talking about Albert Einstein. What did he write that has a lot of people fired up?